A prophet once told me he had seen my baby in a vision. A son, he said, strong, healthy, coming soon. And I believed him, Lord. I believed him so fully it remade me. For 3 years I carried those words like a promise, like medicine, like chains. I replayed that sentence brushing my teeth, washing dishes, lying awake at 3 a.m. Every late period, every negative test, I held on to it like a woman gripping the edge of a cliff. My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how hope, sweet, dangerous hope, pulled me into a darkness I never saw coming. For a long time, I couldn't even say it out loud. If you had met me then, you would have thought I was fine. Steady job, happy marriage, church smile. But inside, I was living on fumes and prayer. It didn't begin with fear or deception or doubt. It began with longing, with silence, with that quiet ache only a woman waiting for a child can understand. The kind of ache that hides behind your smile so well, even your closest friends don't see it. I thought I was being led toward a miracle. I didn't know I was being led toward a secret that would nearly break my marriage, and break me. It happened on a humid Sunday morning, the kind where the church fans worked overtime and the choir's voices felt like warm honey in the air. Sweat gathered at the back of my neck beneath my scarf, and my dress clung slightly to my skin. Pastor Elijah was preaching about Hannah, about waiting, about God's perfect timing. Nothing unusual. Until he stopped, mid-sentence, mid-breath. His gaze swept the room, then locked on me. My heart stuttered. "Daughter, stand," he said. Michael's hand brushed my back. He knew how fragile I'd been. He helped me rise even as my knees trembled. Pastor Elijah stepped down from the pulpit slowly, intentionally, like each step carried revelation. He stood before me, eyes soft but heavy. "The Lord says, the delay is over." The room froze. Even the choir seemed to hold their breath. "By this time next year, you will hold your child." The congregation erupted, clapping, shouting, crying. Sister Grace started speaking in tongues, but I couldn't move. Hope is a dangerous thing. When you've been empty for so long, even a drop of it can drown you. A tear fell down my cheek. Michael tightened his grip around my waist, but something in his body stiffened too, something I didn't understand then. After service, women swarmed me with excitement. One hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. Another whispered, "God has remembered you." Rachel almost dragged me outside to celebrate, already talking about baby names and nursery colors. I smiled through it, nodded, said amen so many times the word lost its shape, like chewing the same piece of gum for too long. Inside, I was shaking. That's when Pastor Elijah's assistant approached. "Ma'am, the pastor would like to pray for you privately." I should have said no. I should have taken Michael with me. I should have noticed the uneasiness in his eyes. But desperation is louder than discernment, and I was desperate. The pastor's office was dim, lit only by a desk lamp and the afternoon sun leaking through the blinds. The air smelled faintly of old books, coffee, and anointing oil. Pastor Elijah waited calmly, hands folded. "Sit, my daughter," he said. I sat. "There is a spiritual blockage," he began. "Not physical, not medical, spiritual." My breath caught. But God has shown me the solution. He reached into a small leather bag and pulled out a tiny bottle of oil, golden, shimmering, thick. "This oil has been prayed over for 7 days and 7 nights. He pressed it into my hands. "Rub it on your stomach every night before bed, and speak the prayer I will give you." My fingers curled around the bottle. It felt warm, alive, holy. "How much?" I began. He shook his head with a fatherly smile. "This is not for sale, but if the Lord leads you to sow a seed of faith, the ministry account is open." I reached for my purse, not because I had money to spare, not because I fully understood, but because someone finally gave me something to do, something that felt like action instead of waiting. I didn't know it then, but that warm little bottle of oil was the first step into a storm I wasn't prepared for, and the seed of faith I sowed that day was only the beginning of a much higher price. I had no idea that the real cost wouldn't be money at all, but my peace, my trust, and the way I saw
Started the
God,
ritual that
myself,
same
and my
night.
husband. I sat on the edge of my bed with the tiny bottle cupped in my palms like it was something alive. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your heartbeat sound louder than it should. Michael was in the bathroom, brushing his teeth, humming a tune I didn't recognize, trying to act normal. But it felt like both of us were waiting for something neither of us could name. I opened the bottle. The oil smelled faintly of frankincense, sweet, heavy, ancient. I poured a drop onto my fingers and rubbed it gently onto my stomach. The warmth spread through my skin, making my breath catch a little. Lord, please remember me. I said it 3 times, like Pastor Elijah instructed. 3 times, slow, reverent, trembling. Michael came out of the bathroom just as I finished. He paused in the doorway, toothbrush still in his hand, eyes flicking from the bottle to my stomach. You already started? He asked softly. I nodded. He forced a little smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Okay, well, good night, babe. He kissed my forehead, but his lips barely touched my skin. That was the first sign. Every night after that, the ritual became my anchor. I warmed the oil between my palms, whispered the prayer, and imagined my womb opening like a flower in the sun. Some nights the prayer felt powerful. Other nights it felt like I was talking to a ceiling that refused to answer. But I kept going, because when you're waiting for a miracle, consistency feels like currency. What I didn't notice at first was how it changed things with Michael. He started going to bed earlier than me, or later, always avoiding the exact moment I took out the bottle. If I asked him to pray with me, he'd say, "You go ahead, babe. I'll join tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. I told myself he was just tired, stressed, overwhelmed. But deep down, something tight and cold began forming at the bottom of my stomach. At church, the prophecy had already spread. Women I barely knew stopped me in the hallway. "Sis Naomi, I heard the good news. Your miracle is coming. Hannah, blessings. Start preparing your testimony." I forced smiles, nods, small laughs. They meant well. They always do. But every word added pressure, like bricks stacking slowly on my chest. Rachel pulled me aside one afternoon. "Girl, you good? You look different." "I'm fine," I lied. She raised an eyebrow. "Okay, but if you need to talk, I'm here." I almost told her everything, but I swallowed the words, because doubt felt like betrayal. One night, about 2 weeks in, I woke up and found Michael sitting at the edge of the bed, head in his hands. The moonlight spilled across his back, and I could see his shoulders shaking. "Baby?" I whispered. He wiped his face quickly. "I'm fine, just couldn't sleep." "You're crying." No, I'm okay. Really, go back to sleep." But his voice cracked on the last word. Something in me tightened, something heavy, something scared. I reached for him, but he stood up abruptly. "I'm gonna get some water." He left before I could say anything else. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling like the room was shrinking around me. Something was wrong. I didn't know what, but the air between us had changed, become thick and fragile, like glass fogged with breath. The next morning, Pastor Elijah's assistant messaged me. "Ma'am, the prophet prayed for you last night. He said the oil must be used faithfully. He also said the spiritual resistance is strong. Don't be discouraged." I didn't know what that meant, but somehow it made me more afraid. That evening, when I pulled out the bottle, Michael immediately stood from the bed. "I need to finish some work," he murmured. "Can you just sit with me while I pray?" He hesitated. His eyes softened for a moment, then dimmed. "Naomi, I need a minute, okay?" He slipped out of the room before I could speak. I sat alone, rubbing the oil onto my stomach, whispering words that were starting to taste like desperation. I didn't know whether the prophecy was failing or my marriage was. And neither possibility, the prophecy had turned into a quiet storm circling my life. At church, people treated me like a woman already expecting, not maybe expecting, not God will do it someday, but expecting, like the baby was already kicking inside me, and all I needed was a due date. It started small. A woman from the choir pressed a hand to my stomach during worship. "Cover the child, O Lord," she whispered. Another sister I barely spoke to grabbed my hands before service. "Don't lift heavy things, okay? Not in your condition." My condition? I wasn't pregnant. But the prophecy had become bigger than biology, and for a moment, it felt good to be seen, to be celebrated, to be wrapped in hope instead of pity. But every smile they gave me felt like a weight placed gently on my shoulders, a weight that never left. Michael felt it too. He started avoiding the church hallway altogether. He'd slip into the sanctuary at the last minute and leave early before the crowd could gather around us. When women congratulated me, he'd stand silently behind me, eyes on the floor, jaw tight. One Sunday, someone shouted across the room, "Brother Michael, congrats on the good news." He froze, actually froze. I felt his hand twitch in mine, but he forced a smile. "Thank you," he muttered, but his voice sounded wrong, hollow. We got home that afternoon, and he barely said 2 words to me. He went straight to the bedroom and shut the door gently, too gently, like he was afraid even the sound of the latch might break something inside him. I told myself he was overwhelmed. Men often felt the pressure of impending fatherhood, even before it happened. That's what I told myself. But late that night, when he thought I was asleep, I heard him whisper, "I can't do this. God, I can't do this." And something inside me cracked. The pressure in church only grew louder. Sister Grace insisted I join the Mothers-in-Waiting prayer group. Deaconess Mara gave me a list of scriptures to read morning and night. Someone else suggested I start buying baby clothes to activate the blessing. Rachel was the only one who didn't jump into the frenzy. She studied my face one Sunday after service, her brow furrowed. "You okay?" she asked quietly. I nodded, adjusting my purse strap. "Of course. You don't look okay." I forced a smile. "I just have a lot on my mind." She stepped a little closer. "Naomi, you know you don't have to pretend with me." I opened my mouth to answer, and that's when one of the church aunties called across the room. "Naomi, dear, I saved you a seat at the front next Sunday. Pregnant women shouldn't sit far from the altar." I felt my breath hitch. Rachel looked at me, really looked. "What's going on?" she whispered, but I didn't answer, because I didn't know how. At home, things got worse. Michael stopped joining me for dinner. He started working late, sleeping early, waking up before dawn. Every time I brought out the anointing oil, he found something else to do: laundry, dishes, scrolling on his phone, anything to escape the room. And when we prayed together, on the rare nights he didn't avoid it, his amen sounded like a door closing. One evening, I tried to hold his hands during prayer. He pulled them back gently, whispering, "Let's just pray separately tonight, okay?" It was the softest rejection I'd ever felt. It cut deeper because he wasn't angry, he was afraid. The turning point came on a Thursday night. I walked into the living room and found him staring at a blank TV screen, remote in his lap, shoulders heavy. His eyes were red, not just tired red, but broken red. "Michael," I said softly, sitting beside him, "talk to me, please." He swallowed hard. His throat bobbed. "I'm trying," he said. I don't know how." "Is it about the prophecy?" I whispered. He flinched. There it was, the first honest reaction I'd seen from him in weeks. "Michael." He rubbed his palms over his face. "Naomi, I'm happy if you're happy. I want you to have everything you've prayed for. I really do." His voice cracked. "But this, all of this, it's a lot." I waited, heart thudding. "But why?" I asked. "Why is it a lot?" He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His face changed, tightened. anxious. "I need to take this," he said, standing too quickly. "Michael, just a minute." He walked away before I could reach for him. I sat alone, staring at the darkened hallway, the anointing oil glinting faintly on the coffee table like an accusation. For the first time since the prophecy, I felt afraid. Not of the spiritual battle Pastor Elijah warned me about, but of my own husband's silence. Because silence always means something. And whatever Michael was hiding, whatever he was running from, it was getting closer. Whatever he was running from, it was getting closer. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. He made coffee, packed his work bag, kissed my cheek, and said, "See you tonight," as if he hadn't spent half the night avoiding my eyes. But the kiss landed wrong. Soft, quick, distracted. Not absent, just hollow. I watched him walk out the door with a tightness in my chest I couldn't shake. Something was shifting between us, slowly, quietly, like a crack forming beneath the paint on a wall. You don't notice it until the whole thing begins to peel. At church that week, the prophecy talk had reached full speed. People didn't just congratulate me anymore. They claimed things over me. "Your womb will carry nations, Sister Naomi. You must protect your spirit during pregnancy. Don't miss prayer meeting. The devil targets women with promises." Every word felt heavier than the last. But Michael? He barely showed up. And when he did, he sat in the back, arms crossed, staring at the floor like the sermon was a storm he couldn't stand in. One evening, Sister Grace asked him to lead a prayer for fathers-to-be. Michael's head snapped up, eyes wide. "Oh, I can't," he muttered. Before I could speak, he slipped out the side door. People assumed he was overwhelmed with joy, but I knew better. Joy doesn't make a man run. At home, the distance between us grew into something solid, something you could bump into in the dark. He stopped initiating intimacy altogether. He stopped touching me casually. No arm around my shoulder, no hand lingering on my waist. Even his goodnight pecks turned into quick brushes, like he was scared of something on my skin. One night, I reached for his hand and he pulled back. Not harshly, not angrily, just gently enough to break my heart. "Michael," I whispered, "are you scared of me?" He shook his head. "No, of course not." But fear lived in his eyes. Fear and guilt. The next morning, Pastor Elijah's assistant messaged again. "The prophet senses strong resistance. He says your husband must join the next deliverance session." I stared at the text for a long time. Something in it felt off, too bold, too forceful. When I showed it to Michael, he went pale. "I'm not going," he said sharply. "Why? It's just prayer." "No, Naomi, I'm not going." His tone cut the air between us like a knife. We stood there in a silence so cold it felt like winter settling between our bodies. "Michael, what's happening to us?" I whispered. He pressed his lips together, looked away. "I don't know how to talk about this." "Talk about what?" He rubbed his temples, frustrated. "Everything. The prophecy, the pressure, the oil, the church treating us like something happened when it didn't." His words stung. "You don't believe it," I said, voice trembling. "I didn't say that." "But you don't." He closed his eyes, exhaled slowly. "Naomi, I don't know what I believe anymore." Those words shattered something inside me. That night, for the first time in weeks, I didn't use the oil. I left the bottle on the dresser and crawled under the covers early, feeling the weight of hope pressing down on me like a wet blanket. Michael came to bed later. I felt the mattress dip beneath him. He turned off the lamp. I waited for his arm to drape around me like it used to. It didn't. Instead, he lay on the very edge of the bed, silent, rigid. After a few minutes, I whispered, "Are you still here with me?" He didn't answer right away. When he finally did, his voice broke. "I'm trying." Only 2 words, but they echoed through me until morning. The next day, I found something that pulled the ground right out from under me. I was looking for a charger in his desk drawer when I saw a folded paper tucked beneath a stack of bills. I wasn't trying to pry. I wasn't snooping, but something made me pull it out. It was a medical lab report, a test dated almost 2 years ago. The name at the top read, Michael Carter. My heart started pounding. I skimmed the page, eyes racing over words I didn't understand, until I reached the line that froze my breath in my throat. Severe male factor infertility. I dropped the paper. The room tilted. My hands shook so violently I had to brace myself against the desk. 2 years. 2 years he had known. 2 years of doctor visits. 2 years of silence. 2 years of watching me cry, pray, fast, beg God, knowing this was the truth. And 2 weeks of letting me believe a prophecy about a child he didn't even think he could give me. I sank to the floor. The report crumpled beneath my palm, realization crashing over me in waves. The secret he had been running from, the one that haunted his sleep, his prayers, his distance, was lying in my hands. And suddenly, the prophecy, the oil, the celebration, none of it mattered anymore. The pressure. Not the oil, not the celebration, not the pressure. All I could see was that single sentence on the lab report, like it had been burned into my eyes. Severe male factor infertility. I don't know how long I sat on the floor. It could have been 5 minutes or 50. Time didn't move the way it normally does. It stretched, then folded, then collapsed in on itself. My hands were shaking so badly I could hear the paper rustling. When the front door finally opened and I heard Michael's keys hit the bowl by the entryway, my whole body went cold. "Naomi, you home?" he called out. I couldn't answer. My voice was hiding somewhere behind the lump in my throat. He walked into the room, still scrolling his phone, and stopped dead when he saw me on the floor. "Baby, what?" I held up the paper with fingers that didn't feel like mine. "What is this?" I whispered. His face drained of color so fast I thought he might faint. The phone slipped from his hand and hit the carpet. "Naomi," he said quietly. "Where did you get that?" "The drawer," I said. My voice sounded small, unfamiliar. "Your drawer. Michael, what is this?" He didn't answer. Silence spread out between us, wide and suffocating. "Say something," I begged. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His chest rose and fell too quickly, like he couldn't get enough air. "You knew," I whispered. "For 2 years, you knew." He sank onto the edge of the bed as if his legs couldn't carry him. His hands covered his face. "I was going to tell you," he said through his fingers. I didn't know how. "When?" I asked, my voice growing sharper. "When were you going to tell me? Before or after the baby the prophet promised arrived?" He flinched. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to look away. "I have been praying," I said, my voice rising with every word. "I have been fasting, crying, rubbing oil on my stomach, letting people prophesy over me in the hallway, while you were holding this in a drawer?" I was ashamed, he choked. "So you lied." "I didn't lie." "You didn't tell me the truth," I snapped. "That's the same thing." He dropped his hands and looked at me. Really looked. Eyes red, face raw. The doctor said my count was low, he said hoarsely. Very low. They talked about treatments, options, all these things that sounded like another language. I felt broken, less than. I didn't want you to see me like that. So instead, I said slowly, you let me believe the problem was me. You watched me beg God for forgiveness for sins I didn't even commit. You watched me ask if he was punishing me, and you said nothing. Tears spilled down his cheeks. I thought, if I prayed hard enough, if I waited long enough, maybe it would change. Maybe I'd be healed before I had to tell you. And then the prophecy happened, and everyone was so happy, and you were finally smiling again, and I panicked. I didn't want to ruin it. My chest ached. My ribs felt too tight for my lungs. So you decided to let a stranger in a pulpit tell me my future, I said, while you sat there knowing the past and present and saying nothing. He didn't answer. The room felt smaller, hotter. My skin buzzed like I was standing too close to a fire. Do you even believe the prophecy? I asked quietly. His eyes flickered. That was answer enough. I believe God can do anything, he said weakly. That's not what I asked. He swallowed. I don't know, he admitted. I don't know what I believe anymore. I know what the doctor said. I know what that paper says. And I know I should have told you. I just didn't know how to be your husband and also be the man in that report. For a moment, the anger flickered, and all I saw was a broken man, not a villain. A man who loved me and still managed to hurt me deeply. Both things were true at the same time, and that made it hurt even more. I needed you to tell me the truth, I whispered. Even if it was ugly, even if it hurt. I needed you to sit next to me in that pain, not lock it in a drawer. I know, he said. His voice was barely audible. And I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Sorry sat between us like a small, helpless thing. It didn't change the report. It didn't change the months I had blamed myself. It didn't change the way the prophecy now sounded less like hope and more like a cruel joke. That night, I picked up the anointing oil and turned it over in my hands. For the first time, it didn't feel holy. It felt heavy. The morning after the truth came out, the house felt different. Not broken, not whole, just suspended. Like everything was holding its breath, waiting to see what we'd do next. Michael moved quietly, gently, like a man afraid to touch anything in case it shattered. Even the sound of the kettle boiling felt too loud in the silence between us. I watched him from the doorway. His shoulders seemed smaller somehow, as if the truth had carved pieces out of him overnight. We should talk later, he said softly without turning around. Okay, I whispered. But later came and went twice before either of us found the courage. At church, I avoided everyone. I slipped in late, sat in the back, and left before anyone noticed. The prophecy that once made me feel chosen now felt like a spotlight I wanted to run from. Pastor Elijah was preaching about faith that moves mountains. His voice thundered through the sanctuary, but none of it reached me. Every verse about miracles felt like a bruise being pressed. When the service ended, I tried to leave quietly, but of course, Sister Grace caught my arm. Naomi, the prophet asked about you. she said with a wide smile. He feels the resistance is getting stronger. He says your husband must join the next session. My stomach tightened. I can't talk about that right now, I muttered. Her expression dropped. Don't let the enemy win, my dear. But the enemy didn't feel like a demon. It felt like confusion. It felt like pressure. It felt like a marriage, unraveling thread by thread. That evening, Michael and I finally sat down on opposite ends of the couch, a whole cushion of space between us. We can't keep avoiding this, I began. He nodded weakly. I know. Why didn't you tell me sooner? He closed his eyes. Because I didn't want to see your face when you found out. And now I can't stop seeing it. I wasn't angry because of the diagnosis, I said quietly. I was angry because I went through everything alone. He looked up at me then, really looked, and his eyes filled again. I hated myself, he said. Every month you cried, every test you took. I hated myself more. I didn't know how to say, I'm the reason. I swallowed hard. You're not a reason. You're my husband. But I failed you. You didn't fail me. You hid from me. The air grew thick with silence again. But this time it felt like understanding trying to break through. I want to fix this, he whispered. Us. Not the prophecy. Not the church. Just us. My heart squeezed. I wanted that too. But everything still felt so tangled. What do we do now? I asked. He shrugged helplessly. Maybe we talk to a doctor together. Maybe we talk to a counselor. Maybe we stop letting other people tell us what our story should be. His words hit me harder than he knew, because for months I had let prophets, assistants, church women, everyone, tell me what God had planned for my life. I had handed them the pen and let them write the chapters for me. What about the prophecy? I asked quietly. Michael hesitated. Naomi, if it brings you comfort, hold on to it. But if it's hurting you, maybe it's time to step back. Later that night, I lay awake listening to his breathing beside me. Not distant, not cold, just tired, human, fragile. Something inside me softened. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of it. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from the prophet's assistant. The prophet says the oil must not be stopped. He senses your faith wavering. Please continue nightly. My chest tightened. I looked at Michael sleeping beside me, face relaxed for the first time in weeks. The oil was on my nightstand, glowing faintly in the moonlight. I picked it up, turned it in my hand, set it back down. Then I turned my phone off. Because maybe faith wasn't supposed to feel like fear. Maybe obedience wasn't supposed to feel like exhaustion. Maybe God wasn't the one asking me to sacrifice my peace. And maybe, just maybe, the first step to healing was letting myself question everything I was told, even if it meant disappointing the people who claimed. Felt strangely quiet, like the whole world was walking on tiptoe around us. Michael and I moved through the house carefully, gently, as if one loud sound might send everything crashing again. He made breakfast, toast, eggs, fruit, placing the plate in front of me without a word. It was the kind of gesture he did when he didn't know how to fix something, but wanted to try anyway. Thank you, I whispered. He nodded. We should talk after work? Yes, I said, we should. But talking would take more than a day, more than a meal, more than one apology. The truth had cracked open the wall between us, but now we had to figure out how to live with all the pieces. At church, I avoided eye contact with everyone. Pastor Elijah's voice boomed across the sanctuary, preaching about obedience, birthing, destiny. His words felt pointed, sharp, deliberate. I stayed in the back, clutching my purse like a shield. When the service ended, his assistant approached me. The prophet asked why you didn't attend last night's vigil, she said. I took a deep breath. I wasn't able to. She blinked rapidly. This is not the time to slow down, Naomi. The enemy attacks hardest when your breakthrough is near. Something inside me twisted. Breakthrough, enemy, delay, resistance. All the words that used to ignite hope now sounded like chains. I appreciate the prayers, I said carefully, but I need some time. Her expression tightened. Time is how women miss their miracles. I walked away before I could react. The edges of my patience were fraying. That evening, Michael and I finally sat across from each other at the dining table. No phones, no distractions, just truth waiting in the space between us. Can you tell me everything? I asked gently. He exhaled long and shaky. The doctor said my count wasn't just low, it was almost non-existent. My heart sank. He recommended treatments, medications, lifestyle changes, a fertility specialist. But I was scared, embarrassed. I didn't want you to see me as the problem. You're not the problem, I whispered. I felt like one, he said. And when the prophecy happened, I was terrified, because I knew what that paper said, and I didn't want to destroy your hope. You didn't destroy it, I whispered. You just hid the truth under it. He rubbed his hands over his face. I kept thinking, maybe God will fix it before I have to say it. Maybe the miracle will cover the truth. And now? I asked. He swallowed. Now I think the miracle might be us finally being honest with each other. The words hit me hard. Not dramatic, not prophetic, just real. And real felt like oxygen. We can get help, I said softly. Together. He nodded, eyes glossy. If you're willing. I am. Later that night, as we prepared for bed, Michael hesitated. Naomi? Yes? I don't want you to keep doing anything that hurts you. Not rituals, not pressure, not prophecies that make you cry at night. His voice cracked. I want us to make choices based on truth, not fear. I felt tears build again, but softer this time. Not sharp, not painful, just human. I think I'm ready for that, I whispered. We climbed into bed quietly, and for the first time in weeks, he reached for my hand under the covers. Not out of obligation, not out of fear, but out of love. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth settle into my bones. Around midnight, a message buzzed on my phone. It was the prophet's assistant again. The prophet senses distance in your spirit. He says the marriage must be brought under covering before it breaks. You and your husband must attend a deliverance session this week. My stomach twisted. For the first time, the message didn't feel like guidance. It felt like control. I looked at Michael sleeping beside me, hand still wrapped around mine, and something inside me whispered, enough. Enough fear, enough pressure, enough letting someone else narrate my destiny. Because for the first time since the prophecy began, I wasn't afraid of losing a miracle. I was afraid of losing myself. Something inside me had shifted. I wasn't angry anymore, at least not in the same sharp way. The anger had cooled into clarity, into a kind of quiet strength I didn't recognize yet, but could feel settling under my skin. Michael noticed it too. You seem different, he said one morning. I think I'm waking up. I replied softly. He didn't ask from what. I think he already knew. At church, I stayed in the back again. No altar calls, no front row celebrations, no whispers of mama to be. I kept my head down and focused on breathing, slow, steady, honest breaths. But Pastor Elijah noticed. After service, he approached me with a smile too polished to be comforting. My daughter, he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. You've been distant. I gently stepped back. I've been thinking. His smile faltered for half a second. Thinking is good, but not when it weakens faith. Doubt is the enemy's first door. I swallowed. I'm not doubting God. His eyes sharpened. But you're doubting me. The question hung in the air like smoke. I'm doubting anything that requires me to be afraid, I said quietly. His expression hardened, only a little, but enough that I felt it. "You must be careful, Naomi," he warned. "The enemy attacks marriages through emotional weakness. You and your husband need covering." Covering, deliverance, alignment. All the words that once sounded spiritual now felt like nets tightening around my neck. "I appreciate your concern," I said calmly, "but I think Michael and I need to hear from God together, not just through you." For a moment, his jaw tightened. Then he forced another smile. "Of course, the door is always open," but the warmth in his eyes was gone. That evening, I told Michael what happened. "You said that to him?" he asked, shocked. I did. He took a deep breath, pride and relief flickering across his face. "Naomi, thank you." "For what?" "For choosing us. For choosing truth." His hand slid into mine, steady this time, not trembling, not hesitant. And that small gesture felt more holy than any prophecy. But the peace didn't last long. 2 days later, the prophet's assistant sent another message. "The prophet requests a private meeting with you and your husband. Mandatory for restoring alignment." Mandatory. I stared at the word, feeling irritation simmer beneath my skin. I showed Michael the message. "No," he said immediately. "We're not going." "I agree." He blinked. He blinked, surprised. "You do?" "I'm tired," I said. "Tired of feeling controlled. Tired of feeling like my womb is a battleground for someone else's spiritual performance." He exhaled, relief washing through him. "I've been wanting to say that for months." We decided to take a walk that night, just the two of us. No phones, no church, no oil, no prophecy. Just air and honesty. For the first time in weeks, we talked. Really talked. We talked about fear, about shame, about love, about the future, about children, about medical options, about what healing might actually look like, not in a pulpit, not in a prayer line, not under prophetic pressure, in the quiet of our own voices. At one point, Michael stopped and turned to me, his eyes glowing softly under the streetlights. "I want a family with you," he whispered, "but I don't want it built on fear." I felt something loosen in my chest, something I'd been carrying for far too long. "Me too," I said. When we got home, another message waited on my phone. "The prophet says delay is disobedience. Your marriage is under attack. Come tomorrow night or expect consequences." Consequences. I felt the words like cold metal. Michael read it over my shoulder. "Absolutely not," he snapped. "This is manipulation." I blocked the number. My hands trembled afterward, not with fear, but with freedom, because choosing ourselves felt like choosing God. Choosing peace felt like choosing truth, and choosing to step away from pressure felt like stepping toward healing. That night, Michael held me while I cried, not from pain, but from release. For the first time since this all began, I wasn't afraid. I was finally reclaiming my own voice. In the days that followed, something unexpected happened. Silence. No calls from the assistant, no messages warning of spiritual danger, no reminders about oil, vigils, or deliverance. Just silence. At first, it felt strange, like standing in a room where a loud machine had finally been turned off, but your ears were still ringing. I kept waiting for the buzz, the pressure, the urgency to return. It didn't. Without all the noise, I started hearing things I hadn't heard in months. My own thoughts, my own questions, my own voice. One evening, while washing dishes, I whispered to myself, "What if God was never the one making me afraid?" The words felt dangerous, yet freeing. Michael walked in just then, drying his hands on a towel. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "I think I'm finally starting to see clearly." He leaned against the counter. "Tell me." I took a deep breath. "I don't think the miracle was the prophecy. I think the miracle is that everything fell apart, and we finally started telling the truth." He smiled gently. I've missed hearing you talk like that. That night, we sat down together at the dining table with laptops and notebooks. Not for a vigil, not for a prophecy, for research. Actual medical information, actual fertility options, actual science, not fear. It felt grounding, real, human. Michael took my hand at one point and whispered, "Whatever happens, we'll walk it together." Those words mattered more than any prophetic declaration I had ever heard. A week later, the silence finally broke, but not in the way I expected. A woman from church, Sister Abina, visited me unexpectedly. She stood at my door, holding a small container of stew and a look that told me she knew something. "I heard you block the prophet's line," she said softly. My heart skipped. "Who told you?" She sighed. "People talk. Assistants talk even more." I braced myself for judgment, but instead, she stepped inside and closed the door. "What they don't know," she continued, "is that I blocked him 2 years ago." I blinked. "You, what?" She sat down on my couch like she'd been waiting to exhale for years. "He told me I needed deliverance because my daughter was born with autism," she said quietly. Said her condition was spiritual. Said I needed to fast from sunrise to sunset every day for a month. My chest tightened. "Abina, I'm so sorry." She shrugged sadly. I believed him, and I fainted on day 14. My doctor told me my body was shutting down. I covered my mouth, horrified. She reached for my hand. "I'm telling you so you know you're not crazy. You're not rebellious. You're not losing faith. You're waking up." The words hit me like warm water. Waking up. Before she left, she squeezed my shoulder. "You and Michael, protect your peace. God is not in fear." After she walked out, I sat on the couch for a long time, letting her words settle into every corner of my mind. Maybe I wasn't alone. Maybe I wasn't disobedient. Maybe stepping away didn't mean stepping outside of God, but stepping outside of manipulation. Later that night, Michael found me sitting quietly. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "I think I'm finally starting to understand what peace feels like." He sat beside me. "What does it feel like?" I rested my head on his shoulder, like breathing without asking permission. He wrapped an arm around me, pulling me closer. As we settled into bed, he whispered, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you still believe in the prophecy?" I thought about it for a long moment. "I believe God sees us," I said softly, "but I don't think he forces us to chase signs or fear consequences. I don't think he speaks through threats." Michael nodded slowly. "Me neither." For the first time, we were aligned, not by pressure, not by a spiritual performance, but by truth. And as my eyes drifted closed, I realized something. Maybe the miracle wasn't a promised baby. Maybe the miracle was the courage to walk away from anything that demanded my fear. Finally broke open, didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, like truth knocking softly after waiting far too long outside. Michael and I were sitting on the couch, a single lamp lighting the room. No pastor, no prophecy, no instructions about oil or alignment. Just us. 2 people, tired but trying. "I think we need to step away from the church," I whispered. He looked at me, eyes soft but worried. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "Not from God, never from God, but from all of this. The pressure, the fear, the manipulation." Michael exhaled, relief flooding his shoulders. "I've been praying you'd say that," he admitted. It was strange, realizing how much of our marriage had been shaped by someone else's voice, how much of my faith had been tangled with fear disguised as holiness, how many of my choices were never truly mine. We spent that weekend rebuilding, not perfectly, not magically, slowly, gently. We made a list of clinics. We deleted numbers that had become sources of anxiety. We talked about boundaries. We talked about children, not as a prophecy, but as a possibility. We talked about us, without pressure, without timing, without oil. For the first time, it felt like we were writing our own story. But I wasn't done with the church, not yet. Not the faith, not the community. The manipulation. The following Sunday, I walked in one last time, not to sit in the back, not to hide, to close the chapter properly. Pastor Elijah saw me immediately. His smile stretched wide, almost triumphant. "My daughter," he called, "the Spirit told me you would return. Your breakthrough is near." "No," I said softly. The whole church fell silent. I stepped closer, calm, steady. My breakthrough already came when I stopped being afraid. His expression tightened just slightly. "I appreciate everything you've tried to do," I continued. "But from now on, God and I will walk together, not through pressure or fear, but through peace." A murmur rippled through the congregation. "You're making a mistake," he said sharply. "No," I whispered. "I'm making a choice." And for the first time in months, I felt free. I walked out of the church with my head high and my heart steady. Michael squeezed my hand as we stepped into the sunlight. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm better than okay," I said softly. "I'm finally home in myself." We drove away, leaving behind the echoes of voices that had once shaped my every breath. The world outside looked brighter, softer, honest. Healing wasn't instant, it wasn't clean, it wasn't perfect, but it had begun. And that is enough. If you're trying to get pregnant and this story felt a little too close to home, go to the infertilitysecrets.com. Discover the 7 signs your body gives before ovulation, the ones almost no doctor ever explains. And if this story made you feel seen, follow this channel. There are more stories waiting for you. I'm Laura Anderson. Take care of your heart. I closed my journal and let my fingers rest on the cover, feeling the weight of every word I had written these past weeks. This book had carried my breakdowns, my heartbreak, my fears, my rebirth. And now it held my truth. I stood slowly, allowing the quiet of the room to settle around me. Not emptiness, peace. A peace I had fought for, cried for, earned. Healing wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was this: a steady breath, a calm heart, a woman reclaiming her own story. Whatever tomorrow brings, I will meet it as myself, whole, here, enough.